Welcome to Switchcraft and Switchery. I'm Ryan, and today we had a Nintendo Partner Showcase. Yep, February 26th, we got some cool new games coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2, and we got some for the Nintendo Switch, but mostly we're going to be focusing on the sequel system in this video. So I'd like to do things a little bit differently here. I'd like to talk about the games that I'm pretty excited about, because there are several. And then I'd kind of like to talk about maybe like the state of the Switch 2 overall after this Partner Direct, just a little bit, and just kind of see how things are going with Nintendo. So let's dive into these cool games, because there's definitely a few I'm really excited for. So right out of the gate, we get kind of a more in-depth look at Orbitals. Now, I'll be completely upfront. When I first saw this game, I was kind of like, pass. I'm just not really that big of like an anime fan or anything like that. But after seeing what I saw today, I was like, dude, I actually think I might pick this up. So, you know, the art style to me is super unique, super cool, and it also sounds like the music is also super awesome. It all kind of seems to be ultra inspired by these like original anime series. Now, again, I'm not a huge anime connoisseur, but I did grow up with a lot of kind of like early 80s anime stuff like Dragon Ball and Macross, like Robotech, Mobile Suit Gundam, Akira, you know, Howl's Moving Castle, Outlaw Star, and this just seems to take all those elements and then combine them into, you know, this super sweet style, right? And something that kind of feels like it came from my childhood. The gameplay looks really fun. It reminds me a lot of like the co-op puzzle solving stuff that you might find in like, you know, Split Fiction or It Takes Two. You know, we'll just have to see kind of what that lands on. But I mean, you definitely have some different elements and like guns and type of weapons that you're going to use to solve puzzles working together. I've really enjoyed playing those kind of games from the couch with people. So I have a feeling I'm going to end up enjoying this game, and I think I'm going to end up giving it a shot. So the next game that kind of like caught my interest was this Pragmata game, a Capcom title. You know, Capcom usually does pretty good combat stuff, and it looks like they've done some innovation here with like kind of a quick puzzle solving, like a hacking that you have to do to be able to like create vulnerabilities for your enemies. And I'm sure that gets used a number of other ways in the game. But, you know, you can use that combat system and, you know, then, you know, defeat the enemies with your weapon or whatever. And, you know, it looks like it's got a pretty engaging story, at least to me, because, I mean, anything with like space or robots, I'm usually down for. So looks like there's something to do with like you're an astronaut on the moon and you've got to work with this like kind of creepy little girl android, but you're trying to figure out like why things are like messed up. And so I'm like, yeah, I'd give that a shot. So the next game that kind of like got my interest going was this Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, I'll be completely upfront with you. I don't know squat about Final Fantasy. I played the original Final Fantasy VII back in like 99. I don't even know. I don't remember when it came out. I should have done my homework. Anyway, I don't know anything about it, and I played 8, and I liked them both and never touched the series again. So I'll be completely upfront. I don't know if this game is a remake. I think it is. I think it's like part of a trilogy remake. I'm not 100% sure, but that's why it's interesting to me. The game looks beautiful. It looks like super big open world. The combat looks really fun. And although I haven't touched any like Final Fantasy up to this point, I think this would be like a really good title to get in with on the Switch. And if it's like the second or third of like a trilogy remake, then gives me something to look forward to go back and like pick up those other remakes and enjoy the full story. So the next game is actually the one I was the most excited to see, and that is Turok Origins. I played the original Turok games back in the day on N64, and it's kind of wild to think that like even with my PlayStation and my Dreamcast, like, dude, the N64 really had the first-person shooter market on consoles cornered. You know, with games like Turok and 007 and, you know, Perfect Dark, if you weren't on a PC, you really needed to be on a 64 to have an excellent experience. And so to see like Turok on the Switch 2, I think this game is much, much needed. The Switch 2, at least right now, doesn't really have that new, polished, kind of sci-fi, fast-paced shooter. And I feel like this game is kind of fulfilling that spot. And the fact that, again, it's slated to release for everything else and also the Switch 2, I think is kind of a big deal. But the gameplay looks really fun. I mean, you're fighting freaking dinosaurs, like, and all sorts of like aliens, and it just looks really, really awesome. And this is probably the title I'm most looking forward to pick up on the Switch 2. So the final game that I'm actually really excited for is maybe an odd choice. It's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. So you might say like, well, that game came out like what, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I don't really remember, but you know, you might say like, well, I've already played that on like my PlayStation or my Xbox. And truth be told, I haven't played it. It's been on my wish list for a while, and I'm like, I'll get around to it. Now I won't have the excuse, but this kind of leads me into my next point. I think that this game really says more about the support for the Switch 2 moving forward than the actual like game itself, right? Like when you look at a lot of the titles that have come out for the Switch, it's like kind of Switch 2 edition stuff, or stuff that could also be had on the regular Switch, right? Or like Cyberpunk, one of my favorite games of all time, but that game is 5 years old. With Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it is a relatively new game that came out that had honestly a lot of acclaim, and it's made by Bethesda, right? Like they make a lot of really excellent, well, Bugthesda, maybe not excellent games, but they make a lot of really popular games like Fallout. Fallout 4 is coming, which is cool. I've played the crap out of Fallout, so I'm probably not going to be picking that up, but the idea that they are getting involved in the system and that we may have titles from them moving forward, I think is a big deal. I would say the same about like Resident Evil Requiem. While I'm not personally excited for that game because I'm just not a huge Resident Evil fan, the fact that it's coming out alongside everything else, I think adds a lot of legitimacy to the Switch 2. You know, when Borderlands 4 came out, I thought that we were going to get Borderlands for the Switch 2, and it's like, well, no, we gotta wait, right? And it just sort of added that idea that like, whatever the Switch 2 gets, it might be like second tier, right? Like that's always been kind of the problem with the Switch, the original, is if you get a third-party game for the Switch, it's a dumbed down version. I remember trying to play some of the NBA 2K games or any of the sports games on the original Switch, and they are awful. They're just, it's not even worth the trouble to buy them. In any of the third-party games, they're always just like a dumbed down, bad loading, bad port version. Like I remember trying to play Hogwarts Legacy on the original Switch and was like, dude, what is this? Like, I have a PC. Why would I even mess with this game? And now I'm like, well, I think I would actually play The Great Circle on the Switch 2 rather than my PC. Not to say that it would be all that better of an experience, but because of the portability and everything, I actually could probably get through the game relatively fast. So I think that there's a lot of games that came out in this partner showcase that, while maybe not my peak interest, I think say a lot about the support for what Nintendo's got going forward. And I think that that's really important for the life of this console. You know, Jeremy and I, we kind of had this like joke back and forth whenever we'd see like a Nintendo Direct over the life of the Switch, where we'd be like, hey, okay, so we're going to get like some sort of like anime farming simulator or a visual novel anime or some like JRPG that nobody's ever heard of, or this like random like 2D or 3D polygon indie game that like is only on Switch or whatever and looks like it's put together in 5 minutes. There just always seemed to be so much shovelware on the Switch and presented in the directs. And then you'd get like your one Nintendo first party title, right? Where you're like, dude, this looks awesome. And truth be told, if you look at my Switch library, most of it is just first party Nintendo games, right? Because anything else that I'm going to get on the original Switch was just better somewhere else. And I know that this partner showcase probably wasn't what everybody was wanting, right? There's so much like fever pitch surrounding like, where's the Nintendo Direct? Where's the big first party Nintendo title? And I think in a lot of ways we kind of need to like change our expectations a bit. You know, when you look at like Xbox or PlayStation, like, or even PC, like what are the things that make those consoles really good? Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation, right? Like technically Insomniac is owned by Sony, I think, but like that's kind of like a first, second party game. Call of Duty, like those games drive sales to the console. you know, as much as people might not like it, a lot of the sports games, like casual people like those sports games and like for them to perform well. And so I think seeing something like this when the partner showcase, where you're seeing good third party content coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, I think actually is a lot more valuable than people might realize at the time. Now, again, that's not to say that every game on the list was awesome by any means, but I think that there might be a bright future ahead, or at least I hope there is. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the partner showcase. Let me know in the comments below, like, what was your favorite stuff? You know, again, it's probably way different than, you know, what I offered. I mean, I didn't even talk about Goat Simulator 3 or like the Elliot game. Again, I'm probably not going to play that, but I know lots of people might like that. So let me know in the comments below. And until next time, we'll see you later.